Okay, gang, this is the second installment for chapter 13. And on the test, I'm going to talk about 7 different social phenomenons. And all these social phenomenons are examples under the name of it are on YouTube. So if you don't understand after reading the book or watching this video and you want an example, I was going to show you some of the stuff. You can just look on the term on YouTube and it'll explain it or give an example. For instance, the first one is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is kind of like psychological attention. Cognitive dissonance was developed by Fessinger, and it is basically beliefs. Your beliefs don't match the information that you're receiving. For instance, you don't think you're very smart, and everybody else tells you you're smart. Um, so your belief is I'm not smart. All the information you're hearing, you are smart. So according to Fessing, we can't live with it like that. So we either change our beliefs. Okay, I am smart, which most people don't do, but the other is deny or distort information. It's just like somebody saying, "Why do you smoke?" And they go, "Well, all the data says that smoking is bad for your health," but they say, "Well, that's the government. You trust the government," or I know somebody's lived to be 94 and they smoked a cigarette every day of their lives and blah, blah, blah. So they're denying this sort of information. It's just like if some of you, if you had boyfriends or girlfriends that were not that pleasing to your parents or guardians, and the more they talk negative about them, the more valuable they got to you. Because you could not make the mistake of picking somebody bad. So if they call them a hamburger, you say, "Well, I'm a hamburger helper." So the more they complained about the person, the more valuable the person came to you. That's cognitive dissonance, and you have to relieve it in either by changing your belief, like we said, or deny and distort. It's just like one of the reasons why we had hazing to join fraternities and sororities is because you do all these stupid activities and you go, "Why am I doing this activity? Well, this crew must be really good for me to do that stuff." So um, cognitive dissonance is, that information coming into your self concept is incongruent from the way you see yourself. It could be good information saying you're bad. It could be good information saying you're good, or bad information you're bad. If you think the other way, it causes cognitive dissonance both ways. The second thing, a social phenomenon they talked about in the textbook is bystander intervention. And we used to think that bystander intervention was the larger the group, the more chance you had for help. But it's just the opposite, because the major finding is larger groups do less likely the victim to be helped. And basically, this study was from an example in New York where Kitty Genovese was a bar manager and she came home. She got out of the car, it was lighted in front of her home, apartment complex, and she was viciously attacked by somebody. Um, she was screaming and fighting. It went on for like 30 some minutes. And she kind of crawled to the front door and tried to get in. The guy came back and finished the job. And when the New York police said, did interview people, they found out that 42 people watched this occur. Even one family moved their couch in front of the window to watch the whole thing, but nobody called the police. And basically, they always said, "Well, I thought somebody else was going to do it." Well, that's because of a large group. When you're only by yourself, excuse me, you're the only one. So therefore, you can't have diffusion responsibility. So if you see somebody on a major road like 70 going to St. Louis, say in the middle of winter, and they're broke down, you're more upset, "I'm not going to call the highway patrol because they're going to come by soon, or somebody's going to call them, so I don't have to worry about it." So the next day, if they find out they died, they froze to death, you go, "Oh, that's too bad," but you don't blame yourself. What if you were on a single lane highway, like Route K in here in Fulton, and you see somebody, very few people go on that route, so you're more apt to help. The other thing is why in bystander intervention is no clear response. What do we do? Somebody knows better at it than I am. So if you have a large group, you think at least somebody knows CPR, knows medical, so why should I volunteer? But when you're the only one, you have to do that. So bystander intervention includes diffusion responsibility and no clear-cut response. And when you're by yourself, you don't have diffusion responsibility because you're the only one, and you got to do something. So in bystander intervention, it is a lot of times, like for instance, like somebody passes out in a big city like New York, you don't know if they're drunk or whatever. So people just walk over them, not because they're mean and thing, but they don't. First of all, if somebody's going to come help them, like the police, and so they can have to blame themselves. And two, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm not a medical person. So that's bystander intervention. The third phenomenon the book talks about is conformity. And we tend to conform not to appear deviant or different. So in the study, Ash got 6 people, and they looked at lines, and they had a 7th, which was actually the subject. The 6 people were all Confederates. And they looked at lines, and the first couple of times they got them right. But then they started missing the length of lines. And Ash discovered that the 7th person, or the subject, started wavering in his or her choice. Even though they knew the correct answer was A, they would say C because everybody else said C, because they didn't want to appear deviant. And Ash discovered that basically, if it is anonymous, if nobody knew what your answer, then you would tend to answer correctly. But when it's out in the open, you tend to follow the group, even though you know maybe that's not the right decision to do. It's just like a good example of this, I think, was years ago when my daughter was in high school band at Fulton High School, and it was a senior show, and they played a concert, and it wasn't very good. They were off. They were all excited about graduating and stuff. But at the end, everybody started standing up and clapping. And I'm going, what they're doing? It wasn't that good. And I noticed I was the only person not standing. So obviously, I stood up. I didn't want to appear deviant. I wanted to conform to the group. In Vegas, I have a friend of mine used to be hired as a person to laugh. He was hired by young comics to sit in the audience. And Stan had a great laugh. And he was paid to laugh because they figured, okay, if you start laughing, well, wait a second, why am I not laughing? So you start laughing, and the comedian's more successful. So Ash discovered that conformity depended on if it was ambiguous, then you tend to follow the group. And but after a while, if you had 10 people and 8 said one way and 1 agreed with you, you tended to stay with the correct answer. So it's really, conformity is really trying not to appear different from the rest of the group. Then the final one I'm going to talk about, I think today I'm looking at the thing, is obedience to a Milgram study on obedience to authority. Milgram was Jewish, and obviously the Holocaust had a major effect on him. And he was in a cocktail party, and people were talking about, it never happened in America because we're too we're too independent. We're always on our own. We're mavericks. And so Milgram wasn't sure that was correct. So he did an experiment where he brought in 2 people. One was the fake, one was the actual subject. They put them in a machine. They put the subject in a machine, big machine thing here, and had numbers across, and had XXX. And every time the Confederate would make a mistake, they had to shock them. And XXX meant death. And what they discovered was, to make things short, was 63% of the people went all the way. And which showed that even Americans will kind of follow authority. And what Milgram discovered in his study was you needed 2 things. You needed an authority figure. So when he dressed up in a Hawaiian shirt, less people followed his directions. But when he had a lab coat and a stethoscope, why you need a stethoscope, I don't know. And also, the second thing he found out is when he took responsibility, saying, if something happened to this person, I will take total responsibility. The person went on and went all the way through on the shot. And there's a great, it's an unethical study here in the United States, but there's on YouTube, there's a great example. The British redid the study, and you can see the whole process there. Watch out for that redhead. Well, she was mean. So the fact is that obedience to authority is that people will follow authority if A, they have an authority figure, and B, that there's loss of responsibility. Okay, I'll stop here. And again, all these things are on Alnet, so you just, Alnet, on YouTube. So if you just look up bystander intervention on YouTube, there's a whole kind of bunch of different examples. If you did the same thing with cognitive dissonance, same thing with conformity. So if you need more clarification, that's a great place to look. Thank you.